The fluorescent lights hummed with a clinical, predatory energy, reflecting off the polished linoleum of the surgical wing. "Scalpel," Dr. Lin said. His voice was a flat line, devoid of tremor. As the country's top general surgeon, Lin's life was a masterpiece of order. An Omega who had clawed his way to the top, he treated his operating theater like a temple. Every gauze was counted. Every suture was a work of art. But tonight, the order was broken. "Doctor, the director is on the line," a nurse whispered, her face pale. "He says the patient on the table. He's a political liability. He's ordering you to let the heart stop. Make it look like a complication." Lin didn't even blink. He continued the delicate repair of the patient's descending aorta. "Tell the director that my duty is to the living. I don't take orders from cowards in suits." The patient lived. Lin finished the surgery with his usual meticulous perfection, scrubbed out and tucked his life's work under his arm, a leather-bound thesis on the integration of historical pharmacology and modern trauma surgery. It was a bridge between two worlds, a project he had poured years into. As he walked through the rain-slicked parking lot, two shadows emerged. There was no negotiation. A blade was driven into his abdomen. As a doctor, the pain was secondary to the professional insult. The knife was rusted, jagged, and filthy. Unsterile, Lin thought with a bitter, fading clarity as he slumped against a brick wall. "I'm going to die of sepsis because of a dirty blade, and no one will ever read my research." The incense of the afterlife. The smell of rain and iron vanished, replaced by the suffocating, heavy sweetness of sandalwood and Kiara incense. Lin opened his eyes. He was no longer in the rain. He was draped in 100 pounds of crimson silk and gold embroidery. He sat on a phoenix-carved throne, his head heavy with a jade-encrusted headdress. Memory search. He was Queen Linshao, a male Omega, the king's favorite, but a pariah to the Dowager Queen. He had 7 sons, 7 targets. The memories were a dizzying blur of palace etiquette and the cold, calculating stares of 5 powerful concubines, each a shark circling the waters of the inner court. Before he could even steady his breath, the great hall erupted in a jubilant cheer. His eldest son, the crown prince, had just been crowned. The boy turned to smile at his father, his eyes bright with hope. Then, the boy's expression turned to one of confusion. He clutched his throat. Lin Xiao's modern medical mind snapped into high gear. Stridor. Cyanosis. He's suffocating. The queen's body acted before the doctor's mind could. A visceral, agonizing scream tore from Lin Xiao's throat. A pain that wasn't his, yet belonged to the very cells of this body. The grief was a physical weight, a maternal bond that recognized the soul of the boy. "My son!" Lin Xiao shrieked, lunging off the dais. But a massive, gold-clad arm barred his path. King Zhao held him back, his own face a mask of grief and terror. "Shower, stay back. The royal physicians. They are the only ones permitted to touch him during a sacred ceremony. They are doing nothing." Lin Xiao fought, scratching at the king's expensive sleeves. "Let me go. He's dying." He was forced to watch. He watched as the physicians burned, cleansing paper and chanted prayers, while the prince's fingernails turned blue. He watched as the boy's movements became sluggish, then stopped altogether. The meticulous doctor within him was screaming. A simple tracheotomy, a hollow reed, anything. But the queen was held captive by protocol. The prince died on the cold, unforgiving marble. The sharks in the water. The funeral lasted 7 days, and for 7 days, Lin Xiao was a ghost. The grief of the body was a tidal wave. He felt the phantom weight of the prince's head on his shoulder, the memory of his first steps. Even if Lin was a man from the future, the queen's heart was broken, and he had to carry the shards. He lay in his darkened chambers, his mind finally beginning to organize the chaos. He knew this wasn't a curse or heaven's will. It was a murder. A soft rustle of silk announced a visitor. It was the senior consort, followed by the 4 other concubines. They came under the guise of comfort, but their eyes were sharp, searching for weakness. "It is such a tragedy," the senior consort sighed, her voice like honeyed poison. But the empire cannot be without a shadow. The Dowager Queen is already whispering that your other 6 sons lack the vitality to lead. Perhaps it is time to look to the other branches of the family. My son is not even cold in the ground, Lin Xiao said, his voice low and raspy. He sat up, his movements suddenly precise. The weak Omega replaced by a surgeon who had seen the worst of humanity. The concubines exchanged glances. The queen looked different. His eyes weren't blurred with tears anymore. They were scanning them like he was looking for a vein to puncture. The selection of the shadow. The Dowager Queen wasted no time. Citing the instability of the queen's lineage, she convinced the king and the imperial council that the next crown prince must be chosen through the trials of the sun and moon. If the queen's sons are truly chosen by heaven, the dowager declared from behind her silk curtain, they will survive the tests. If not, then the senior consort's son shall take the mantle. Lin Xiao stood in the center of the court, the king looking at him with a mixture of pity and confusion. The king loved him, but even the king was a slave to the dowager's influence and the pressure of the 5 concubines who controlled the noble families. I accept, Lin Xiao said, his voice echoing. But if my sons are to be tested, the physicians shall not interfere. I will oversee their health myself. The concubines smirked. What did an Omega Queen know of medicine? Lin Xiao walked back to his palace and looked at his 6 remaining sons. Scared, young, and marked for death. He reached into his sleeve and pulled out a piece of charcoal and a blank scroll. Listen to me, he told them, his surgeon's authority filling the room. The world thinks you are prey. They think I am a shell. They are wrong. From this moment on, your lives are governed by order, hygiene, and my word. We are going to finish the thesis I started in another life, and we are going to use it to survive. The first test was only days away, and the sharks were already scenting blood. But for the first time since the prince fell, Lin Xiao felt a cold, familiar calm. He was back in the ore, and he was the one holding the knife. The palace air was thick with the scent of ancient dust and the unspoken tension of 12 competing families. Following the death of the first crown prince, the king, under immense pressure from the Dowager Queen, decreed that the trial of the ancestral scroll would be the first gate. Of the 12 princes, only those who passed this test of intellect and history would be permitted to continue. Among them were Lin Xiao's 6 remaining sons and the sons of the 5 powerful concubines. Prince Muran, son of the senior consort, arrogant and favored by the dowager. Prince Chenwei, son of consort Mei, known for his tactical mind and sharp tongue. Prince Jing, son of consort Hua, the eldest of the concubine sons, physically imposing. Prince Yen, son of consort Ruo, quiet and studious, often overlooked. Prince Tao, son of consort Yu, young but fiercely competitive. The mourning of the queen. In the private chambers of the Magnolia Pavilion, Lin Xiao sat in a silence so heavy it felt physical. The grief of the body he now inhabited was a relentless beast. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the face of the eldest prince, the boy's purple lips, the desperate clawing at a throat that wouldn't open. Lin Xiao's hands, once the steadiest in the medical world, trembled as he touched the boy's favorite silk kite. He hadn't known this child, yet the cellular memory of the queen's womb cried out for him. I am sorry, Lin Xiao whispered to the empty air. I was there, and I had the knowledge to save you, but I was a prisoner of this rank. He stood up, his eyes turning from liquid grief to cold, surgical steel. He walked to the wash basin and scrubbed his hands with a ferocity that turned the skin raw. Never again, he vowed. From this moment on, I am not just a mother. I am the chief of surgery in this palace. I will treat every threat as an infection to be excised. The first trial, the ancestral scroll. The 12 princes were summoned to the great library, a cavernous hall filled with thousands of years of imperial history. The Dowager Queen sat behind a screen of pearls, her voice cold as she addressed the boys. The history of this empire is written in blood and wisdom, she declared. You will be given the chronicles of the Iron Dynasty. You have 3 hours to analyze the 3 greatest failures of our ancestors and provide a solution based on the laws of the land. Those who falter will be out. The concubines smirked. Their sons had been tutored by the finest scholars for years. They expected Lin Xiao's sons, who had spent their time playing in the gardens, to fail instantly. The hidden complication. As the princes sat at their mahogany desks, Lin Xiao observed from the gallery. His meticulous eyes noticed something. The ink provided to his sons was darker, thicker. It had a faint, metallic odor. Iron gall ink mixed with lead acetate. As his sons wrote, the fumes would induce a dull headache, tremors, and mental fog. It was a slow-acting neurotoxin designed to make them appear slow-witted and incompetent before the king. The doctor's move. Lin Xiao didn't cause a scene. Instead, he requested a blessing of tea for all the princes. The king, still moved by the queen's recent loss, granted it. Lin Xiao himself carried the tray. He placed a cup before each of his sons. Inside the tea was a concentrated dose of vitamin C and calcium, derived from crushed eggshells and citrus rinds he'd prepared in secret. It was a crude but effective chelation therapy to help their bodies combat the heavy metal absorption. "Drink," he whispered to Prince Jiho, his second son. "The tea clears the eyes when the ink is too dark." The debate of the failures. One by one, the princes stood to present. Prince Muran, the senior consort's son, spoke eloquently of military conquest, his voice booming. The dowager nodded in approval. The other concubines' sons spoke of tax laws and border walls. Then Prince Jiho stood. His head had been throbbing, but the queen's tea had kept the fog at bay. The greatest failure of the Iron Dynasty was not the loss of the northern border, Jiho said, his voice steady. It was the great plague of the Third Era. The ancestors tried to fight the disease with swords. They burned the villages instead of cleaning the water. They lost 40% of the population not to war, but to a lack of sanitation. The library fell silent. It was an answer no scholar had ever taught. It was the language of the modern doctor, filtered through the mouth of a child. Lin Xiao watched as the king's eyes widened. For the first time, the king looked at his second son not as a gentle Omega's child, but as a potential ruler. The result. When the sun set, the tolling of the bell announced the results. 4 of the minor concubine sons had failed. The lead in the air and the complexity of the task had broken their composure. They were led away in tears. The senior consort's son, Prince Muran, passed. Consort Mei's son, Qinwei, passed. Consort Hua's son, Jing, passed. And all 6 of Lin Xiao's sons remained. The senior consort leaned toward Lin Xiao, her fan snapping shut. "A lucky guess for your boy, my queen. But the next test requires more than just a sharp tongue. It requires constitution." Lin Xiao turned to her, his expression as blank as a sterilized sheet. "Luck had nothing to do with it, consort. I simply ensured they were well hydrated. I suggest you do the same for your son. He looks a bit jaundiced." The senior consort recoiled as if bitten. The shark had found a predator in the water. The first gate was closed, and the survivors were now standing on the edge of a much deadlier precipice. The atmosphere in the palace had shifted. The scent of ink and lead still hung in the air of the library, but the court's attention had moved to the sprawling, chaotic world beyond the high stone walls. The king stood before the remaining 8 princes, Lin Xiao's 6 sons and the 2 strongest sons of the concubines, Prince Muran and Prince Qinwei. "A king who knows only the silk of his bed is a king who rules a shadow," the king declared. "For the second trial, you will cast off your royal robes. You will dress as minor nobles and walk among the people of the capital for 3 days. You must observe their grievances and return with a report on the greatest threat to our city. The quality of your insight will decide who moves to the final stage." The queen's meticulous extraction. Back in the Magnolia Pavilion, Lin Xiao stood before his 6 sons. His eyes, usually clinical, were softened by the lingering grief of the body. He looked at his 2 youngest, Prince Min, aged 5, and Prince Seo, aged 7. You too, Lin Xiao said, his voice firm. You are withdrawing from the trial. The boys looked up, startled. But mother, we want to help our brothers. Lin Xiao knelt, his hands gripping their shoulders with a strength that brooked no argument. He knew the variables of the outside. The capital was a petri dish of pathogens, crowded streets, and assassins who didn't care for the rules of a palace. In the modern world, a doctor didn't send a toddler into a contagion zone. The palace is a cage, but the city is a jungle, Lin Xiao whispered. I have already lost one son to a poison I couldn't reach in time. I will not lose you to a stray blade or a random accident in a crowded market. Your contribution to this family will be staying alive and becoming the scholars this empire needs later. He turned to his 4 elder sons, his expression hardening into that of a chief of surgery briefing his residents. Listen carefully, he said, his voice dropping to a low, authoritative register. When you step out those gates, you are no longer individuals. You are a unit. Stick together. Never let your back face a crowd. If you eat from the same pot and only after the street dogs have had their share. If you see a noble in distress, look for the ambush. These people, the concubines, do not want reports. They want funerals. Do you understand? Yes, mother. The 4 princes chorused, unsettled by the raw intensity in their mother's eyes. The confrontation in the garden. As the princes prepared to leave, Lin Xiao walked through the peony garden to meet the king. There, he was intercepted by the senior consort, who was surrounded by her maids. She looked at Lin Xiao's plain, simplified robes with a sneer. I heard the news, my queen, she said, her voice dripping with mock pity. Pulling your youngest sons out? It seems the cursed line is even more fragile than we thought. Perhaps you should pull the rest out as well. They look so delicate in the face of real commoners. One of her maids giggled behind a silk fan. The senior consort stepped closer, her voice a sharp hiss. After all, an Omega's sons are meant for the inner chambers, not the throne. You are just delaying the inevitable shower. Lin Xiao stopped. He didn't flinch. In the modern world, he had dealt with hospital boards and arrogant surgeons who thought they could bully him. This was nothing. He turned to face her, his posture so straight it seemed to add inches to his height. The gentle queen was gone. In his place stood the man who had told a senator to go to hell. Consort, Lin Xiao said, his voice dangerously calm. In my world, there is a very specific protocol for dealing with a festering wound. One does not negotiate with it. One debrides it. The senior consort's smile faltered. What nonsense are you? You have forgotten your place? Lin Xiao interrupted, stepping into her personal space. I am the queen of this empire. My rank was given by the king and sanctioned by the heavens. You are a guest in my house who has overstayed her welcome. He leaned in, his eyes cold and clinical, scanning her face as if he were looking for a place to cut. If you ever openly disrespect me or my sons in front of the court again, I will not seek the king's intervention. I will use the laws of the inner palace to have you stripped and flogged for treason. And if you think your dowager protection will save you, remember this. I am the one who prepares the king's tonics. I am the one who knows exactly which herbs cause a heart to stop in the middle of the night without a trace. He reached out and flicked a stray hair from her shoulder. The senior consort visibly trembled. Do not test me again, Lin Xiao whispered. I have already lost a son. I have nothing left to fear, and a man with nothing to fear is the most dangerous surgeon you will ever meet. He walked away without looking back, leaving the shark gasping for air in the wake of a predator she didn't know existed. The 4 princes moved through the capital's southern district, their eyes sharp. Prince Jiho led the pack, his mind replaying his mother's warnings like a clinical checklist. To their left, they saw Prince Muran, the senior consort's son, tossing gold coins to a crowd of beggars to create a spectacle of charity. He was surrounded by a wall of people, completely unaware of how exposed he was. The crowd surrounding Prince Muran was a chaotic sea of reaching hands and desperate shouts. a perfect smokescreen. Prince Ji-ho, trained by the meticulous eye of his mother, felt the hair on his neck rise. He saw the shift in the crowd. The way three men in coarse tunics didn't reach for coins, but instead moved with the balanced weight of trained killers. Diamond formation. Now! Ji-ho barked. The four brothers snapped together, back to back, just as a sharp thwip sliced through the air. A jagged, black-tipped arrow hissed past Ji-ho's ear, thudding into a wooden stall. Assassins! The slums erupted. While Muran's guards scrambled to protect their coin-tossing prince, a second volley of arrows rained down from the rooftops. Prince Ji-hoon, the third son, gasped as a bolt tore through the meat of his shoulder. Almost simultaneously, a masked attacker lunged from a side alley with a short blade, catching the fifth prince, Sung, across the thigh as he stepped to shield his younger brother. Blood, bright and arterial, splashed against the mud. "They're using the crowd," Ji-ho roared, drawing a concealed, razor-sharp surgical scalpel Lin Xiao had gifted him. He didn't swing wildly. He struck with clinical precision, severing the tendons in the lead attacker's wrist with a single, flicking motion. "Move toward the stone bridge. If we stay in the mud, we die." The brothers fought a desperate, limping retreat. Ji-ho applied a makeshift tourniquet to Sung's leg using his silk belt, his fingers working with a terrifyingly calm muscle memory inherited from the surgeon's soul. They escaped into the labyrinth of the merchant district, leaving the killers behind, but the damage was done. They weren't just returning with a report. They were returning with scars. The verdict of the Hall of Truth. 3 days later, the Hall of Truth was a theater of cold tension. The four princes stood before the king, battered and bandaged. Prince Ji-hoon's arm was in a sling, and Sung leaned heavily on a crutch, his face pale. From blood loss, Lin Xiao sat on his throne, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. The queen's body was trembling with a visceral, maternal rage, but the doctor's mind was calculating the political infection in the room. Prince Muran stepped forward first. He looked pristine, his robes untouched. "Father, the city is plagued by lawlessness. While I was feeding the poor, I witnessed a rebel cell attacking nobles in the Weavers' district. I managed to secure a list of their hideouts." He handed over a scroll that was suspiciously detailed. The king looked at the scroll, then at his wounded sons. "And the queen's sons?" Ji-ho stepped forward, his voice like iron. "We didn't find rebels, Majesty. We found a mapped conspiracy. The men who attacked us wore the crest of the Ministry of Works under their tunics. The hideouts Muran found are actually the homes of the whistleblowers who tried to report the poisoning of the city's wells." The king's gaze darkened. He saw the discrepancy. However, the Dowager Queen spoke from behind her screen, her voice a chilling frost. "Evidence of civil unrest is still evidence, regardless of the source. Prince Muran has shown bravery in the face of rebellion. He, along with your eldest four, shall proceed to the final stage." The senior consort smirked. Her son had survived the cut, the surgical confrontation. Once the king dismissed the court to tend to the wounded, Lin Xiao didn't head for the infirmary. He waited. He watched the Dowager Queen begin her slow, regal exit toward her private gardens. He intercepted her at the Moon Gate, dismissing her terrified eunuchs with a single lethal glare. "A word, mother," Lin Xiao said. He didn't bow. He stood directly in her path, the scent of the spirits he had used to clean his son's wounds clinging to him like a shroud. "You are bold, Omega," the Dowager hissed, her eyes narrowing. "To block the path of the Empress Dowager is a crime of—" "I don't care about your crimes," Lin Xiao interrupted, stepping into her personal space. He reached out and grabbed her hand, not with the softness of a queen, but with the cold, diagnostic grip of a surgeon. He felt the tremor in her thumb, the slight yellowing of her sclera. "Let go of me. You orchestrated that ambush," Lin Xiao whispered, his voice vibrating with a frequency that made the Dowager freeze. "You sent those men to ensure my sons returned in boxes. But you made a mistake. You used the same unsterile tactics that killed me once before. He leaned in, his lips inches from her ear. I saw the arrows. The poison on them is a crude neurotoxin derived from the aconitum plant. It's the same substance being mixed into the tea you've been drinking to calm your nerves. Isn't it? The senior consort is a fool, but she's a loyal one. She's been microdosing you for months to keep you dependent on her family's physicians. The dowager's breath hitched. For the first time, the mask of porcelain cracked. You lie. Am I? Lin Xiao pulled a small glass vial from his sleeve, containing a sample of the black residue from Jihoon's wound. This is death, and it's sitting in your gallbladder right now. In my world, I've cut out cancers more honorable than you. He let go of her hand, his expression turning to one of pure, clinical disgust. The final test is coming. If another hand touches my sons, if so much as a fly bites them, I will not go to the king. I will simply stop being a doctor. I will watch the toxins you've unleashed on this palace consume you from the inside out. I will watch your organs fail one by one, and I will describe the process to you in meticulous detail as you gasp for air. He leaned back, his eyes burning with a terrifying, modern fire. The senior consort is a parasite, but you are the host, and I am the surgeon who decides if the host is worth saving. Clean your house, dowager, or I will burn it down to sterilize the ground. Lin Xiao turned and walked away, his crimson robes swirling like a warning. Behind him, the dowager queen stood in the shadow of the moon gate, her hand shaking so violently that her gold rings clattered against the stone. The gentle queen was dead. A god of life and death had taken his place. The evening air in the Magnolia Pavilion was thick with the scent of braised lotus root and medicinal ginger. Lin Xiao sat at the head of the table, his gaze drifting over his sons as they ate with the boisterous energy of boys who had escaped death. In his modern life as Dr. Lin, this scene would have been an impossible dream. He had been a titan of the surgical wing, but he had lived in a hollow, sterile silence. The diagnosis of infertility had been a cold sentence delivered early in his career, a malfunction he couldn't fix with any scalpel. He had spent his nights in a quiet apartment, burying his longing for a family under piles of medical journals and his unfinished thesis. He had accepted a life of solitude, convinced he was a broken omega who had nothing to offer an alpha but a dead-end lineage. But here, the cellular memory of the body he now inhabited sang a different tune. He felt the phantom weight of the 7 children he had birthed, 6 living, 1 a jagged hole in his soul. I was barren in a world of machines, yet here, I am a father of a dynasty, he thought, a fierce, primal gratitude swelling in his chest. I will not let this second chance be snatched away by the filth of this palace. The king's pruning. The following morning, the court was a theater of sharp edges. The 4 elder princes who had survived the city's ambush stood tall, their bandages still fresh. The king looked at them, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and a terrifying, weary caution. He turned to Lin Xiao, his voice heavy. The trials have become a slaughterhouse shower. I will not see your entire line extinguished in the name of a crown. For the final gate, I require only 1 champion from your house. You must choose one of these 4 to proceed. The others shall be removed from the selection to ensure our lineage survives, no matter the outcome. The senior consort's eyes gleamed with a predatory light. If Lin Xiao chose only 1, the other 3 would be politically sidelined, and the lone champion, Prince Jiho, would be a singular, vulnerable target. A king must know when to sacrifice a limb to save the heart, the king added, his voice pleading for understanding. Lin Xiao's modern mind calculated the variables. To choose one was to isolate him, but to refuse was to defy the king. He looked at Jiho, the most meticulous of his sons. Jiho will stand, he said, his voice a cold scalpel. He will carry the weight of his brothers. The final trial, the village of silent stones. The final test was announced with a simplicity that belied its danger. To rule an empire, one must first be able to mend a village, the king declared. Prince Muran and Prince Jiho shall be sent to the village of silent stones. a remote settlement currently being ravaged by a mysterious malaise and internal strife. They will be sent to the same village, but to different halves, separated by the river. Each will be given a personal guard from my own royal watch. The Dowager Queen leaned forward, her voice a chilling rasp. The rules are absolute. At the end of 7 days, the village elders will convene. Whoever the town awards the imperial honor stamp, the mark of true gratitude, shall be named the next crown prince. The surgeon's briefing. Before the carriages departed, Lin Xiao pulled Ji-ho into his private apothecary. He didn't offer a mother's tearful prayer. He offered a medical briefing. He handed Ji-ho a leather kit filled with vials of distilled alcohol, charcoal filters, and a manuscript written in a strange, precise hand. "This village is not cursed, Ji-ho," Lin Xiao whispered, his eyes burning with a modern intensity. "My research into historical pharmacology suggests the silent stones suffer from a specific poisoning of the earth, likely arsenic leaching from the nearby mines into their wells. The people will be irritable, their skin will show lesions, and they will be dying of wasting. Do not treat the spirits. Treat the water." "And Muran?" Ji-ho asked. "Muran will try to buy their gratitude with gold and tonics," Lin Xiao said, a cold smile touching his lips. "But gold cannot chelate a toxin. Remember, a doctor's greatest tool is not the knife, but the truth. The complication, the two halves of the whole." Upon arriving at the village of Silent Stones, the contrast was immediate. The East Bank, Prince Muran. Muran, backed by the senior consort's secret funds, began a lavish campaign. He brought in wagon loads of fine food and sacred water from the capital. He threw feasts for the sick, gaining immediate popularity. The elders of the East Bank bowed low, blinded by the gold. The West Bank, Prince Ji-ho. Ji-ho, following his mother's meticulous protocol, did the opposite. He ordered the wells closed. The villagers, already suffering from the irritability of arsenic poisoning, nearly rioted. "The prince is trying to kill us with thirst," they screamed. The hidden complication. The senior consort had anticipated Ji-ho's medical approach. She had sent a traveling physician to the West Bank ahead of time to tell the villagers that the queen's son carried the same curse that killed the crown prince. As Ji-ho tried to build a filtration system using the charcoal and stones his mother provided, the villagers began to pelt him with rocks. The king's royal guard, under strict orders not to interfere in the test of leadership, stood by and watched as Ji-ho was cornered in the village square. Lin Xiao, receiving reports through his own network, sat in the palace. He looked at the senior consort across the courtyard. She was already celebrating. "You think the stamp is bought with gold?" Lin Xiao whispered to the empty air, his hands steady as he finished a new entry in his thesis. "But the people only truly honor the hand that removes the pain. Wait until the sacred water runs out, Muran." The silent stones are about to speak. The sun beat down on the west bank of the village, casting long, jagged shadows over the square. Prince Ji-ho stood his ground, a bruise blooming on his cheek where a stone had grazed him. In his hand, he held not a sword, but a simple glass vial of clear water. "You think I bring a curse?" Ji-ho's voice rang out, steady and clinical, mirroring the tone of the man who had raised him in the Magnolia Pavilion. "Look at your hands, the dark patches on your palms, the way your breath smells of garlic even when you have not eaten. This is not a spirit. This is the earth itself turning against you because the mines have bled into your veins." Behind him, the king's royal guard remained like statues, their hands on their hilts but their expressions unreadable. They were forbidden to help him lead. He had to earn the people's trust through the sheer force of his mother's logic. The contrast of the river. Across the narrow river, the East Bank was a theater of excess. Prince Muran sat on a gilded chair, watching as the villagers gorged themselves on the rich meats and sweet wines he had provided. The senior consort's strategy was simple: satiety over surgery. "Drink, eat," Muran shouted, his voice jovial. "The crown cares for you. My brother on the other side seeks to starve you, but I bring the bounty of the capital." The villagers cheered, their faces flushed with temporary health. But Lin Xiao, watching the reports from the palace, knew the biological clock was ticking. The sacred water Moran brought was merely mountain spring water. It didn't remove the arsenic already stored in their tissues. It was a placebo for a terminal condition. The turn of the tide. By the fourth day, the meticulous protocol began to show results. In the West Bank, Jiho had successfully convinced a small group of desperate mothers to try his filtration system. He had them boil the water with specific clay and charcoal, the chelation method Lin Xiao had researched in his thesis. He then administered a bitter broth made of high-sulfur vegetables and roots. The skin lesions on the children began to fade. The malaise lifted. The villagers, seeing their children waking up with clear eyes for the first time in years, stopped throwing stones. They began to bring Jiho their broken tools instead, helping him build a permanent stone filtration system for the entire district. The complication. In the East Bank, disaster struck. The rich food Moran had provided, high in fats and proteins, actually accelerated the metabolic strain on the villagers' weakened livers. Suddenly, the people of the East Bank began to collapse by the dozens. The sacred water was gone, and the villagers turned into a panicked, dying mob. Moran, having no medical knowledge, panicked. "It's a plague. Guard the perimeter. Don't let them touch me," he screamed, retreating behind the king's guard. The final move, crossing the river. At the palace, the senior consort was in a frenzy. "The West Bank has been cured, while the East is a graveyard. My queen, what have you done?" Lin Xiao stood in the imperial council, his face a mask of cold, surgical indifference. He looked at the king. "My son didn't just save his half of the village, Majesty. He understood that the river is one circulatory system. If the East dies, the West will eventually follow. He is currently crossing the bridge." Indeed, in the village of Silent Stones, Jiho didn't stay on his winning side. He took his medical bags, his charcoal filters, and his small team of healed West Bank villagers and crossed the bridge into Moran's chaos. He ignored the senior consort's son, who was cowering behind his guards, and went straight to the elders of the East Bank. "I am not here for your gold," Jiho said, his hands moving with the rapid, mechanical efficiency he had practiced under Lin Xiao's watchful eye. "I am here to stop the bleeding. If you want to live, do exactly as I say." The stamp of honor. On the seventh day, the king arrived at the village. The senior consort and the dowager queen followed, their faces pale as they saw the transformation. The village wasn't a site of feasts or monuments. It was a site of order. The wells were sealed with new stone filters. The people were working together, their complexions clear, their eyes bright. The village elders from both the East and the West stepped forward. They held a single wooden block, the imperial honor stamp, reserved for those who saved the soul of the people. The elder of the East Bank, a man who had nearly died at Moran's feast, looked at the king. "One prince gave us gold to forget our pain," the elder said, pointing at Moran. "The other prince gave us the truth and the tools to save ourselves. He didn't just rule us, he healed us." The elder pressed the stamp onto the royal scroll, not next to Moran's name, but firmly under Prince Jiho. The aftermath. Back at the palace, the senior consort collapsed, her dreams of the throne crumbling. The dowager queen retreated into her chambers, her hands shaking so badly she could no longer hold her tea. The king looked at Lin Xiao as they stood on the balcony overlooking the jubilant city. "You have raised a king, Xiaoer, not just a prince." Lin Xiao looked out at the horizon. He thought of his 5 other sons in the north and the one he had lost. He felt the weight of his 7-fold blessing and the manuscript of his thesis, now nearly complete. "I didn't raise a king, Majesty," Lin Xiao replied, his voice calm and clinical. "I raised a survivor. In this palace, that is the only thing that matters." The Omega Queen turned away, his heart finally whole. He had been a doctor who couldn't have a family. Now he was a queen who had saved a dynasty. The unsterile world had finally been cleansed. The morning of the investiture dawned with a sky the color of bleached bone, slowly bleeding into a brilliant imperial gold. For the man who was once Dr. Lin, the morning began not with prayer, but with a ritual of clinical preparation. He stood before a polished bronze mirror as his attendants layered him in the robes of the state. Heavy crimson silk, stoles embroidered with the seven-tailed phoenix, and a headpiece of jade and gold that weighed as much as a surgical tray. He looked at his reflection. The infertile doctor from a world of steel was gone. In his place was the mother of a dynasty. He turned to his 6 sons, who stood in a perfect line. "Today, you do not just walk," Lin Xiao told them, his voice echoing with the authority of a chief surgeon. "You show the world that this family is a single, unbreakable organism. Stay in formation, shoulders back, eyes forward." The grand procession of the 7 gates. The ceremony was designed to be a grueling test of endurance and dignity. The path to the high altar was nearly a mile long, lined with 10,000 soldiers of the royal guard. The station of the ancestors. The procession stopped at the first gate. The head priest stepped forward, holding a bowl of sacred water. In the past, this was a moment of superstition, but Lin Xiao watched with a diagnostic eye. He had ensured the water was boiled and filtered the night before under the guise of purification rites, to ensure no pathogens reached his children. Jiho dipped his fingers and touched his forehead. The crowd gasped at the prince's steady hand. Behind him, his 5 brothers moved like shadows of his own grace. The Hall of 1,000 Ministers. As they entered the central hall, the 300 ministers of the empire stood in silence. Lin Xiao walked at the front, his gaze fixed straight ahead. As he passed the senior consort's brothers and the dowager's allies, he didn't look away. He met each of their gazes with a cold, clinical stare that sent shivers down their spines. He was the surgeon, and they were the pathogens he was about to excise. The coronation at the high altar. At the summit of the palace stairs, the king waited. He sat upon the dragon throne, looking at his queen and his sons with a mixture of awe and profound relief. To the left of the king sat the dowager queen, her face a pale mask of crumbling porcelain. To the right stood the senior consort, her eyes red-rimmed, her posture sagging under the weight of her son Muran's public failure. The king stood and took the jade seal of the crown prince. In the state of Gone, the stones were silent. The king's voice thundered across the plaza. But the wisdom of the queen's son gave them a voice. For saving the people where gold and steel failed, I name Prince Jiho the heir to the great Yan Empire. As the king placed the crown on Jiho's head, the 6 brothers let out a synchronized shout of loyalty that echoed off the mountains. The queen's silent vow. Lin Xiao felt a lump in his throat that no medical terminology could describe. He looked at his 6 sons, the children he was never supposed to have, and felt the phantom presence of his lost eldest son standing among them. The broken Omega had successfully secured the future. He looked down at the crowd, then at the dowager and the consort. The public celebration was for the kingdom, but the private settling of accounts was for him. He watched as Jiho stood, the jade reflecting the sunlight. The boy's eyes met his mother's, and in that look, there was a shared understanding. The survival of the line was complete. Now only the surgery remained. The grand ceremony had concluded, leaving the palace in a state of ringing silence. While the kingdom celebrated the new crown prince, Lin Xiao retreated to the inner sanctum of the Phoenix Pavilion. He did not call for the king. He did not call for his guards. He summoned the 5 concubines, the sharks who had circled his sons for years, to a room that had been stripped of its usual silk cushions and tea sets. In their place stood a long wooden table covered in bleached white linen, laid out with the sharp, glinting tools of his trade. The 5 women entered, led by the senior consort, their faces a mixture of lingering arrogance and new, creeping dread. They found the queen standing at the head of the table, his crimson sleeves rolled back, his hands submerged in a basin of steaming, alcohol-scented water. "Welcome," Lin Xiao said, his voice dropping into the flat, mechanical tone of a chief surgeon. "Close the doors. From this moment on, consider this room my operating theater." The diagnosis of the rot. The senior consort attempted a final, shaky sneer. "My queen, If this is about the trials, the king has already. The king sees a palace, Lin Xiao interrupted, not looking up as he meticulously dried his hands. I see a patient in multi-organ failure. And you five? You are the pathogens. You are the infections that have been eating away at the health of this dynasty. He walked toward them, his steps measured and heavy. He stopped in front of Consort Mei, whose son had attempted to bribe the village elders. In my world, when we find an infection, we don't negotiate with it. We don't ask it to be better. We excise it. We cut until we hit healthy tissue. The new protocol. He gestured to the table of instruments. Things are changing. I am implementing a new protocol for the inner palace. From tonight, the following rules are law. Sterilization of influence. All private communication between your noble houses and the Ministry of Works is severed. Any gift that enters this palace will be screened by my personal physicians. If I find so much as a trace of lead, arsenic, or nightshade, the sender will not be exiled. They will be treated as a biological threat and executed. The quarantine. Your sons who failed the trials are not unfit. They were poorly raised. They will be placed under my direct tutelage. They will learn the science of life, not the art of assassination. They will be disinfected of your influence. The surgeon's oversight. You will no longer manage the servants. I have mapped every hallway, every water vat, and every kitchen. I know where the rot hides. I am the one who decides who eats, who breathes, and who stays. The warning to the senior consort. Lin Xiao leaned in close to the senior consort, his eyes scanning her face with a terrifying, clinical clarity. He reached out and touched the pulse at her throat, his thumb pressing just hard enough to remind her that he knew exactly where the carotid artery lay. You especially, he whispered. You think you are a shark in these waters. But I have spent a lifetime cutting into things far more dangerous than you. You tried to use an unsterile blade on my family. You forgot that a surgeon knows the body better than the person living in it. He let go of her, his expression turning to one of pure, professional coldness. This palace is no longer a den of intrigue. It is my operating room. And as the lead surgeon, I have decided that for the patient to survive, the infection must be contained. If any of you so much as whispers a plot against the crown prince, I will not seek a trial. I will simply invite you back to this room for a procedure from which you will not wake up. He picked up a small, sharpened scalpel and held it up to the light. The air is finally clean. Keep it that way. The 5 women backed away, their faces drained of color. They had spent their lives playing for power, but they realized they were now facing a man who played for life and death. The broken Omega had successfully sterilized his kingdom. The atmosphere in the room turned from cold to arctic. Lin Xiao watched the senior consort's face. For a moment, he saw her eyes flicker with terror, but it was quickly replaced by a desperate, twitching defiance. It was a look he had seen in the eyes of patients who refused to believe their diagnosis. A stubborn, malignant growth that thought it could outsmart the surgeon. She wasn't backing down. Even now, she was calculating, her fingers twitching toward a hidden pouch in her sleeve. Metastasis, Lin Xiao thought, his eyes narrowing. I haven't just found a wound. I found a recurring cancer. And if I don't remove the margins, it will simply spread to another organ. The final diagnosis. You think you are clever, don't you? The senior consort hissed, her voice a ragged whisper. You think these rules will stop the bloodlines of the great houses? My son is the blood of the king. You are just a fluke of biology, an Omega who got lucky. Lin Xiao didn't flinch. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply reached into his sleeve and pulled out a stack of intercepted correspondences, sealed with the wax of the southern rebel lords. Luck had nothing to do with it, Lin Xiao said. This is your pathology report. He threw the papers onto the linen-covered table. I didn't just watch you in the palace. While my sons were in the village, I had my contacts biopsy your entire network. These letters prove you weren't just trying to win a selection. You were preparing to sell the border states to the rebels in exchange for their support of Muran's coup. You aren't just an infection in the palace. You are a systemic failure. You are the disease that will kill the body of this empire if I let you breathe one more day. The terminal procedure. The other 4 concubines scrambled away from the table, their faces ashen as they realized the senior consort had dragged them into treason. I gave you the chance to be contained, Lin Xiao said, picking up a small, crystal vial filled with a clear, odorless liquid. A concentrated extract he had spent the last week distilling. But a cancer that strikes twice must be removed entirely. No margins left behind. The senior consort lunged for the door, but Lin Xiao's voice stopped her like a physical barrier. The king's guard is already at your brother's estate, he said calmly. And the sacred wine you drank during the ceremony this morning? I personally oversaw its preparation. In about 30 seconds, your nervous system will begin to shut down. It won't be painful. I am a doctor, after all. It will simply be an ending. The consort's hand flew to her throat. Her eyes widened, the pupils dilating as the toxin took hold. She tried to speak, but her vocal cords had already begun to paralyze. This isn't revenge, Lin Xiao whispered, standing over her as she slumped to the floor, her breathing slowing into a final, quiet rhythm. This is debridement. The palace is a body, and I am its surgeon. For the crown prince to live, you had to be removed. The sterile future. He turned to the remaining 4 concubines, who were trembling so violently the floorboards rattled. The disease has been eliminated, Lin Xiao said, his voice returning to its steady, professional tone. The senior consort died of a sudden heart failure, brought on by the excitement of the day. Her family has been relocated to the borders for their own safety. Does anyone else feel unwell? The women shook their heads in frantic unison. Good, Lin Xiao said. He began to pack away his instruments, wiping the silver blades with a clean cloth until they shone. Then let us begin the recovery phase. This palace is officially a sterile environment. He walked out of the room, leaving the infection behind. The senior consort's body had been removed with the quiet efficiency of medical waste. But Lin Xiao knew the surgery was not yet complete. To ensure the body of the empire truly thrived, he had to address the primary source of the malignancy, the Dowager Queen. He found her in the secluded Jade Pagoda, a place of heavy incense and oppressive shadows. She was sitting in a high-backed chair, her face a map of ancient, bitter lines. Her hands were no longer just trembling. They were twitching in a rhythmic, neurological pattern that she could no longer hide. Lin Xiao entered alone. He didn't bow. He didn't bring tea. He brought a small, black medical case and a single candle. The final diagnosis, the matriarch's decay. You have come to gloat, Omega? The dowager rasped, her voice like dry leaves scraping on stone. You think because you have the king's ear and the boy has the crown, you have won? Lin Xiao walked toward her, his eyes scanning her with a cold, diagnostic light. I am not here to gloat, mother. I am here to perform a final assessment. In my past life, I saw many patients like you. People who spent their lives consuming small amounts of poison to build immunity, only to realize the poison was storing itself in their bones. He reached out and took her wrist. His grip was firm, clinical. He felt the brittle pulse, the irregular thrum of a heart burdened by a lifetime of heavy metal, tonics, and toxic secrets. Your hands, Lin Xiao said, his voice flat. The tremors aren't just age. They are the result of the lead white makeup you've used for 40 years and the mercury immortality pills the senior consort's family provided you. You aren't just old, you are toxic. Literally. The evidence of the ambush. He released her hand and opened his case. He pulled out a single, scorched arrow tip, the one that had nearly killed Prince Jihoon. I found this in the Weaver's district, Lin Xiao said. The alloy is unique to the Dowager's private guard. You didn't just plot. You actively tried to amputate my family to protect your own power. You killed my eldest son. You tried to kill the rest. In medicine, we call this a necrotic infection. It's a part of the body that turns on itself. The dowager tried to pull away, her eyes flashing with a final, desperate spark of rage. I did it for the stability of the throne. You are an outsider, A man with a woman's womb and a demon's mind. The surgeon's sentence. Stability does not come from murder, Lin Xiao whispered, leaning in so close that the dowager could see the reflection of her own fear in his eyes. Stability comes from health, and you are the most diseased part of this palace. He stood up, towering over her. I could expose you. I could show the king the ledgers I found in your chambers, the ones detailing the payments to the assassins. I could watch him break as he realizes his own mother is a monster. But I am a surgeon. I prefer to minimize the trauma to the patient. He pulled out a small, amber vial. This is a neural inhibitor. It won't kill you, but it will ensure that those tremors of yours become a permanent state. It will cloud your mind just enough that you can no longer form a coherent sentence or a complex plot. You will live out your days in the northern summer palace, resting in the mountain air. You wouldn't dare, she breathed. I have already placed it in your incense, Lin Xiao said, gesturing to the burner in the corner. You've been breathing it for the last 10 minutes. The procedure is already underway. The dowager's eyes widened. She tried to stand, but her legs buckled. Her tongue felt heavy, her thoughts beginning to fray like old silk. You will be treated with the utmost respect, Lin Xiao said, his voice fading into a gentle, clinical hum. The world will see a tired grandmother retiring to the mountains. Only you and I will know that the cancer has been successfully localized and contained. Sleep now, mother. The empire is in better hands. The sevenfold peace. Lin Xiao walked out of the pagoda and into the fresh, moonlit air. The surgery was over. The senior consort was gone, the dowager was neutralized, and the palace was finally truly sterile. He walked back to the Magnolia Pavilion, where his 6 sons were waiting. They were sitting around a table, Jiho showing the youngest how to read a map of the stars. The man who was once a lonely, infertile doctor stood in the doorway, watching the family he had fought 2 lifetimes for. He looked at his hands, steady, clean, and no longer stained with the blood of the past. He had lost 1 son, but he had saved the rest. He had arrived a prisoner of his biology and left a master of his destiny. The deep, resonant tolling of the palace bells finally ceased, leaving behind a silence that was no longer heavy with dread, but light with the clarity of a fresh morning. Lin Xiao stood on the highest terrace of the Phoenix Pavilion, his hands resting on the cool stone balustrade. The heavy ceremonial jade had been removed, replaced by the simple, functional silks of a man who worked with his hands. He looked down at the capital city, seeing the smoke rising from hearths instead of funeral pyres, and felt the immense, cooling relief of a surgeon who had just stepped out of a 12-hour theater. Inside the pavilion, the sound of laughter drifted out. It was a chaotic, beautiful noise, the voices of his 6 sons. He turned and walked back inside, pausing at the threshold. Prince Jiho, the crown prince, was sitting on the floor with the 5-year-old Min, showing him how to properly tie a tourniquet with a scrap of silk, a skill passed down from a father who lived across 2 worlds. The other 4 brothers were huddled over a map, discussing the reconstruction of the village wells. They were his masterpiece. In his modern life, Dr. Lin had died in the cold, clutching a thesis on the past because he felt he had no future. He had lived as a ghost in his own body, convinced that his inability to father a child made him a man without a legacy. He had been a technician of the human heart who never let his own beat for anyone else. But as he looked at these 6 boys, he realized that the infertility of his first life had been a cruel training ground. It had taught him the value of every single breath, the sanctity of a steady pulse, and the fierce, protective instinct required to keep life from slipping through one's fingers. He walked to the table and sat down, his presence instantly drawing his sons toward him like planets to a sun. The smallest, Min, climbed into his lap, smelling of ink and the medicinal herbs Lin Xiao had taught him to grind. "Mother," Jiho said, looking up with eyes that held the wisdom of a future king and the gratitude of a saved son. "The palace feels different, like the air has been scrubbed clean." "It has," Lin Xiao replied, his voice soft but carrying the weight of an absolute truth. The infection is gone, Jiho. The margins are clear. He reached out and rested his hand on the stack of parchment that had become his new life's work, a record of every cure, every anatomical discovery, and every life saved within these walls. He was no longer a doctor seeking a legacy. He was a father who had built one from the ashes of a conspiracy. He looked at the empty seat at the end of the table, a silent tribute to the son who had been lost to the shadows. He didn't look with grief, but with a vow. I saved them, he whispered in the quiet theater of his mind. I saved what was left. The Omega Queen closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the rhythmic, healthy thrum of the 6 hearts surrounding him. The surgery was over. The patient, his family, his kingdom was in recovery. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, Lin Shao wasn't just surviving. He was home.